ready for a barrel of fun? A kit's so easy, it's like shooting a fish in a barrel. A kit's so simple, you'll just barrel through it. Look no further than here. This is the Saab J29 Tunnan from Hella in 1/72 scale, also known as the flying barrel. In addition to this, we're actually looking at a display team variant of this aircraft. We're looking at the J29 of the Flying Barrels Aerobatics team. This helicopter is actually one that a fellow modeler and content creator sent me. More models.
So I've got the stepladder out because Miss Modeler would love a model to build. And so I thought I'd go through my stash here, which is like a mini stash. I've got a lot of kits in my attic, but I thought I'll pick one for her here that she may have never built before. I know, I'm going to give her a helikit.
Have a look in the description below because it was super kind of them to send this kit to me for me to make, because I have built one of these a very long time ago when I was a kid. I actually built the Matchbox kit of the J29 and I wanted to redo it for a long time. To emphasize my obsession with Swedish aviation, I've actually been to the Flygvapen Museum in Linköping twice. I actually have a really loose friend in Sweden, and twice when I visited them I went to the Flygvapen Museum, which is probably my favorite aviation museum anywhere. It's just so well done. And I mean, Swedish aviation is to die for. As usual with these videos, we'll have a look at the history of the plane itself, we'll look at the history of the kit, what I call the Kitstory, and the aircraft in pop culture. And if you want to see the models early as they're being made, check out both the Discord and, well, Instagram, which hopefully I'll start posting to more regularly. But you can see both of those on screen now. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you want to support me further, become a channel member to help fund the channel. Sweden's aviation industry is really interesting. They had a lot of external influence originally, with a lot of Italian, British and German designs being brought. As the war commenced, of course, they ended up turning to more and more indigenous designs. Things like the B-17 bomber, they also had the J-26 fighter, and later on they would have the J-21, which would also become the first jet that they ever had. Now the J-29 followed on from the J-21 and became one of the most important aircraft in European aviation history. After the war, Sweden noticed there was a gap in its aviation. It didn't have a capable jet fighter in the same levels as the rest of the world was developing, and so developing the J-29 became a priority. The development of this started in 1945, and unlike with the J-21, which was just an adaptation of a pusher plane that you already had, this was built from the ground up, and it also used research that was shared following the capitulation of Germany. I mean, if you look at a lot of the German research projects, and also, of course, the MH-62, the actual first operational jet fighter, you'll notice a lot of similarities between that and the J-29. There was an alternative proposal which was a bit more traditionally designed, but given the research that was received, it was decided to proceed with a swept wing fighter. One feature that was there from the original design, though, was the unique shape of the fuselage, which is why the aircraft is known as the Flying Barrel itself. On later models, a dogtooth was cut into the wing. In fact, that's what we'll actually see on this kit. You can buy conversion kits, resin ones generally, to convert these models into the earlier design, but to be honest, this version is probably the most well-known version anyway. The J-29 flew for the first time on the 1st of September 1948, and by 1951, the first aircraft were being delivered to the Swedish Air Force. There was also a ground strike role for the aircraft of the A-29 and a reconnaissance version of the aircraft, which was known as the S-29C. One of the most famous use cases was by the UN during the Congo Civil War. This was J-29s and some S-29s, and actually this kit has a unique camouflage for that. The camouflage design of this is really interesting, and it's one of the few aircraft kits that you can easily get which has UN markings on. That was one of the things that I remember as a kid just being really unusual and kind of blowing my mind. I didn't know the UN had sort of roundels for aircraft. Another interesting fact of the aircraft, once it had its dogtooth and an afterburner was fitted later on the J29F, it became the first British engine to have an afterburner, which was the de Havilland Ghost engine. Now, we've already mentioned 2 operators of the type in both Sweden and the UN, technically, but another operator of the type was Austria. This was marking a long history of Saab aircraft that Austria would have up until very recently with the retirement of their Saab 105s. But the model we're making today is not, well, just a combat variant, it's an aerobatic display team variant. I do have to say that I've used one book mainly for the research for this, and that is Team 60 book. The link for that is in the description below, and I've put it on the screen here as well. This book is in Swedish, and I've used Google Translate to read it. That's quite often the case for a lot of these sort of less popular subjects, and it made research really easy. The full name of the book, which I'm probably going to butcher, so I'm sorry to any Swedish speakers there, but Team 60 Flygvapnets Uppvisningsgrupp. I hope that's even vaguely similar. So the team itself flew from Gothenburg and were F9, that's sort of the wing that they were from. And they were actually originally known as the Haugland Group. Now, this seems to be quite a common thing in Swedish display teams, as sort of reading the book showed, but they named a lot of the groups after sort of the leader of that group, I guess. In this case, that was named after Per Axel Haugland. Between 1954 and 1959, they flew in a 4-ship configuration, and for what is quite rare for Swedish display teams, they actually had an international show at neutral Geneva, Switzerland. Now, like a lot of display teams in this era, not just in Sweden, but they didn't need to last a long time. And sort of reading about Swedish display teams, it seems a lot of them were a lot more haphazard than, say, Italian, French, or British display teams. In fact, even for their national team, they would paint some of the decals on and then remove them. That's not so much the case for these ones, but definitely is the case for sort of later teams that we'll look at in this series. But I think it's important to give the context of this display team series. There's actually been a kit made as well that gives you the full decals and model to make the aerobatic display team in full. I didn't get that, and I used post-market decals, which we'll talk about a lot in this video. But for now, let's just have a look at the Kitstory of the one we're making today, Hella's Saab 29 Tunnan. The kit we're making today is the Hella Boxing, and this was originally released in 1978. There was a slight format change the following year, and 2 really cool releases came out in 1988. A Swedish and an Austrian version of the kit. This is kind of similar to the Finnish Fuga that we've seen on the channel previously, which I made, just not in a Finnish scheme. As in the Red Devils video, and that'll be linked in the description below. In 1993, we had the last Hella Boxing for quite some time. The Airfix would release the type in 2005, whilst they were under that shared umbrella of the Humber brand. This returned to Hella and then was released again in 2009, 2017, 18, and 2020. My box is a little bit beaten up now, but this is still sort of the newer boxing, but not quite the newest. The newest boxings and releases from Hella, generally for old ones, will say when they're from. This one doesn't, but it does feature the sort of background information of the aircraft, shows you all the decals and the paints that you need, and also on the back has a really helpful thing for you to download instructions online, which I think every single manufacturer should be doing at this point. There are a couple of competitors for 1/72 scale kits, and that includes Turangas. Turangas are probably the premier sort of model making experience for Swedish aircraft, or at least that's my understanding. I've not built one yet, hope to do so at some point now. There's the Matchbox kits, which are from 1979, and then Revell Reboxies, because of course they did. And Revell actually had that one that I mentioned earlier, which had the display team like decals in, which I really wish I'd got, but I didn't and didn't find out about it until I was writing the script for this video. Unfortunately though, none of the manufacturers for Revell or Hella do one with all 3 variants in. Like, Hella have the Swedish and the UN in there, and I don't know why they don't include Austria. It just feels like a silly exclusion. And again, Revell don't include all 3 either. There are boxings by Revell, I think, that cover most of them, but yeah, I don't get why between them they don't just have like one kit with all 3 operators. It seems a bit mad. Now, for reference, I bought my decals online. I actually bought a set that was meant to include sort of the display team, and it seems to have like a couple of different decal sets in, and they're of varying quality. And before we even go into review of the kit, I'll say that the decals I use were not great. We'll go into that in more detail, but they don't seem to be like available at all anymore, the ones I've used, so that's fine because they were not great. Now, throughout this video, you will have seen footage from War Thunder, and that's one of the places where this sort of remains in popular culture, and has probably had a bit more of a resurgence in sort of knowledge. It's also an aircraft that remains flying with the Swedish historic flight, which I think is awesome. I've never been fortunate enough to see it fly, and hopefully at one point I'll go to Sweden so I can see the full historic flight. I've seen a couple of these in museums because there's some in the UK itself, so that's really cool, at least I've seen the aircraft, even if not in flight. This is actually one of the first jets I did well with in War Thunder, and I strongly recommend going through the Swedish tree if you are wanting to learn how to fly jets in War Thunder, because it's such a forgiving aircraft, gets missiles pretty early on, and is an excellent dogfighter. From what I've read about the aircraft itself, it seems to reflect its real life experience, where it was viewed quite favourably for its performance. Well, I think that's enough at looking at the history of this wonderful kit. Let's go into the unboxing so we can see what's inside. Welcome to the unboxing of the Saab Tunnan, the J29. This is the HAL boxing, and it's one of the more recent yellow boxings of the kit. They had a very similar iteration before that was in a grey colour. You'll notice I have some additional decals, and we'll go into those later because those are not part of the kit as standard. The sprues you get in the kit are very simple. You can tell this is definitely an older kit, but it doesn't look like horrendous considering its age. Closer up you can see a lot of the details of that, though they are in raised panel lines. A more experienced modeler could probably rescribe these to be recessed panel lines, but I'm definitely not at that level, so we'll be going with it as it is. You get a couple of different variants of the aircraft in the kit, so there's a couple of bits that you have twice that have slight variations, so you just need to pay attention to that in the instructions. But overall, I think the kit looks relatively nice. It's a really easy, simple to build kit, and definitely one that you can do as like a chill build or just as like a reset build. The decals that come with the kit are, well, they're fine. I ended up using different decals just because I had them, and well, I wanted to make the aerobatic team. So I was using a selection of different decals. It turned out much after I completed the kit that, well, I guess I'll just let you find that out later on because something shocking happened. So now we've seen what's inside the kit. I guess it's quite simple, right? Now, I will throw straight off the bat and say I made this whilst I was on a lot of painkillers, and I was in a lot of pain. So this is not going to be my best work, and it's all hand painted as well. That's something that will be changing in a few videos time. Now, just because it's hand painted doesn't mean that this isn't going to be a nice looking aircraft. And I'm relatively happy with what we do get as a result, but there's going to be a lot of challenges throughout the way. The decals themselves are what I want to talk about just before we go into the construction, because these decals were misleading. They look like they have enough parts to cover the whole aircraft, but what they've actually done is given you two copies of the same decals. So instead of having the decals sort of for one side and then the other, you had the decals for one side and then given those again for the other, so that then they were all backwards. It was really infuriating, to be honest, and really disappointing. I didn't realise this until I was already getting the decals on, and by then I didn't want to buy another kit just to do it. And need I remind you, I was on a lot of painkillers and also in incredible pain. So I did this in lots of really, really small increments to give me something to do, as I was not well. And I had to hand paint some bits that I don't think I was as confident honestly could have been. I'm still happy with the result in the end, but you'll see what happens during the construction. Let's get to it. As we get into the construction of the kit, I cut out the wings first of all, and glue them together. I always do this because it gives them a long time to set before you're putting together the fuselage of the aircraft, or really any other parts. I think it's just become a habit now at this point to instinctively cut out the wings and stick them together. So when I finally have a kit that requires you to do the wings in a much different way, I will definitely end up screwing myself over. However, once the wings were glued together, I went to focus on the cockpit. The cockpit is of a relatively simple design, being of the type of variety that we saw in a lot of the sort of 50s to 70s kits. It means that it's really easy and quick to put together, and, well, you can add a lot more detail if you want to through either photo etch or scratch building parts. Of course, I'm not going to be doing that because I'm building the kit as it comes. Well, except the decals, of course, but we'll go into decals later because that was a whole palaver. Once I cut out both the fuselage halves, I just sort of dry fit them together and see how they fit. Everything in this kit actually fit together relatively well. There was very little that I had to do to make it look, well, nicer. Overall, I am going to be hand painting this whole model. It's the last model I'm doing where I'm just hand painting the whole thing, so it's kind of a bit of a momentous occasion, I guess, for me. But it is also all silver, so we'll see how that turns out because silver is notoriously difficult to do by hand. There is a transparency part that has to go into the undercarriage. We will actually cover that with some of Vallejo's masking solution. If you don't know, the Vallejo's one is the sort of the blue solution, and I use it because it's like the cheapest one and it has Amazon brown, so that's how I ended up with it. But once you've soaked that on, I don't know if I've stuck it on yet. I thought I did, so I might have just been fitting it, but I do stick it on before I paint the entire thing. Now, the landing gear on this kit I found not the best. I did find that it collapsed a few times and it just lacked a bit of integrity. Kind of like myself, I guess. Okay, jabs at myself aside, I did just find it didn't hold super well, and so it constantly shortened as I broke it and then had to refix it, and then broke it and had to refix it, as you can see I'm doing here. But eventually I got it that it sort of sits quite nicely, and I don't think it's super noticeable, but I mean, I definitely could have done better on this. I don't think it's the kit's fault entirely. It partly the design, partly just me being a bit clumsy. I mean, even Archie, as you just saw, came on to have a look what was happening. The undercarriage bay, I think I got the right way around, but I couldn't quite tell from the instructions. As this is one of Hella's, like, older kits, like a re-release, it has the instructions re-released as well. They don't tend to remake the instructions. That means the instructions are, well, they're not great. They're not quite like the full-on explosion kit view of like the 60s and 70s, but there are a couple of different stats of lots of things going on. It's like, it's not super unclear, but I think it could have been clearer. I guess kind of like this narration right now could have been clearer too, huh? I stuck the actual kit together with Ravel's glue. I just tend to find this gives you a bit more working time, but also is a bit stronger, like in a faster sense than Tamiya's. I really love Tamiya extra thin. I just prefer Ravel's glue when I'm sticking together the actual kit itself, at least on a simple kit like this. And once we stick the two fuselage halves together, we're just going to check out everything lines up, and, well, everything does. After that, it's a case of putting the landing gear in place, well, the front piece anyway. The remaining landing gear will go into the two indents that you can see behind that. These will come as part of the build, but for now, we're just focusing on this front piece. This is a bit of a delicate part to have right at the front. As I say, I found quite a few issues with it sort of just breaking over time. The tail section is a single piece. It glides into place, but it's not like the most secure in the world, so you do have the opportunity to knock it out of place. So you do need to be a little bit careful or use some tape to secure it whilst it bonds to the fuselage. But I mean, it's not the end of the world, it's relatively simple. The engine also had like an end cap to it, and I forgot to fit this in, so I ended up sort of trying to bodge it in place and sort of cut it in place, and it didn't particularly work. And I had this, I mean, I do this all the time on jets. I just forget that engines need to be done properly. So yeah, the engine is just as it is, and that's the same on a couple of the models that I end up making in this Swedish series. The wings go on really easily, and you can see the distinctive dog tooth design on this later model Saab. The undercarriage in the middle of the fuselage goes in really nicely as well. These are much stronger than the front undercarriage, so it does mean that at least you're going to have that to hold a lot of the weight. I don't know how much weight I actually put in the end, but I just use these standard fish weights and just throw it into the front of the nose. There's another nose section that goes on in the front of this, and well, I just figured I'd try and weigh it down whilst I could. I used glue and glaze to get this all in place. It was quite messy, but it was definitely worth it. Once that was all complete and the front to nose section was put in place, I spray painted the whole thing with Revell's black spray paint, and then went ahead and started painting with Revell's 99 aluminium. This went on really nicely. I tried not to get too much of a layer and have some of the black show through in some areas to show a bit more of a natural coloration of the aircraft. Making it one uniform colour it wouldn't look as good. This is definitely something that's much easier to do with pre-shading and an airbrush, but at this point in my journey, I hadn't come to terms with using an airbrush, and well, that definitely changes in the next video, as you will soon see. So I went ahead and started putting the decals on once I'd finished the aluminium layers. Now, this is the thing with these decals. I thought these were from Flying Colours, as they came in the same sort of plastic wallet, but turns out these might be Matchbox or Matchbox rip-offs. What I did find with this though is that they seem to be the wrong way around. So most of the parts fit on, but some of them, they are definitely just double prints of the same side of the aircraft rather than printed to the curvature of the other side of the aircraft, so they don't actually fit on properly. This could have just been me, and I could have been doing something wildly wrong. However, it wasn't until I'd completely finished the aircraft that I actually noticed this was the case. I was using reference pictures, and that's why I realised one of the emblems was the wrong way around, because it just didn't match up to anything I was seeing online. So that's what led me to cutting them up and using paint alongside the decals. The decals were of course set with Microsol and Microset in the respective order. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I always get them middled up, but it tells you on the bottles which way around to do it. They ended up going on quite nicely, and as you can see there, that's where I've cut one up to make sure it fit in the way that I thought was the most appropriate. The decals did actually go on quite nicely, and I had limited breakage with them, and I did find that painting with Revell's black on top of it meant that I could blend the decal into the rest of the aircraft with minimal issues. What I did not like though was the decals for the insignia of Sweden. So these ones I did actually use, the Flying Colours variant. These looked much better, and well, I'll actually use them on subsequent projects as well. This is one of the issues I had with the banner section at the back, because you have to put the insignia here. So I had to find one that fit, and I couldn't use the Hello ones, so that's why I went with the Flying Colour ones. This section also I found not to be the best at adhering to the shape of the aircraft, and took me a couple of goes, and also some paint. The same with the underwing sections. Now, had I had the instructions from the start, I probably would have realised where these went and did them in the right way, but instead I fumbled around and did it based on reference pictures, so I'm not going to be too harsh on myself if I made this much more difficult than it needed to be. I again went over and painted on the sections where they were out of register because there was some white showing underneath, and some of it just doesn't look quite right. But once it was finished, I'm actually quite pleased with the result, and I think it looks like what the reference pictures I had online, or at least I hope it does. I guess you guys are the real judge for that, huh? I did find this quite a nice construction. This was actually a model I built when my rib was broken, and I did it all in very short bursts because I couldn't sit for very long doing the model kit. And it's also why the lighting probably isn't the best as well, because that wasn't really my priority. As mentioned earlier, these are the Flying Colours Aero Decals insignias for Sweden, and I'll use these on the rest of the aircraft to make sure that it all has the same registering and colour match. I think it looks pretty good. So you've seen this kit complete, and I'll say I kind of want to try and get the Revell boxing of this kit so I can do it with the decal, but I'm not unhappy with how it turned out, and given the circumstances, I think I did remarkably well. I'm kind of sad that I did hand paint this because I think the metallic comes off quite poorly as a result of that, but I guess I'll let you guys be the judge. So let's have a look at this kit popping off.
sunshine and new life in the way I need. Counting the days until summer, feeling the warm rays upon my face. Leave all my worries in the gentle breeze. Big sunshine and new life in the way I need.
Well, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below if you think I did an okay job. You'll probably be delighted to know that I'm doing more Swedish slating Aperov too, so that includes the Acro Hunters, well, Hunter, and the Acro Delta's Dragon. So they'll be coming up in later videos. As for whether you should buy or fly this kit, I think it's a good buy. It's not very expensive for a kit, and it's really simple. If you are brand new and just want to build a kit with no worries, then this is definitely an easy one to go for. The most difficult thing was getting weight in. Painting is also relatively simple because you can just do pretty much flat aluminium. Obviously I chose a slightly different scheme, but that's again entirely up to user choice. If you wanted to, either do the UN scheme, which would practice some paintwork, whether you're airbrushing or hand painting this. So again, a really good option and a very unique one, as we mentioned at the start of this video. So overall, yeah, I'd have to say buy this kit. But I would say buyer beware with the decals you get, because sometimes when you're looking in the bargain barrel, they're not quite as good as you'd hope. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to support the channel further, you can become a channel member, either on Patreon or here on YouTube itself. Advanced kit level members also get a shout out at the end of every video. You can check out my socials here as well. And well, I hope you've enjoyed this video and have a lovely day, no matter where you are. And I will see you later. Bye! Thank you to all my channel supporters. Of course, the shout out goes to my advanced kit level supporters, and that includes Bob and Genevieve Albridge, David Barber, Taggers365, Jeff Dioramas, Iron Jew, and the two longest supporters of the channel, we have Crazy Loja and Explosive Water. Thank you guys so much. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, make sure to like the video, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. I really enjoyed you being here and, wow, going through this journey with me. And there's a recommended video here just for you.